My wife, Asuka, fired me publicly at the annual company gala, and in response, I threw my wedding ring into the champagne and demanded a divorce in front of the entire company. The company gala was held at that five-star hotel in the east of the city. I sat on the right side of the main table, in a position neither high nor low, but this seating arrangement already spoke volumes about my current situation in the company. The lazy Susan on the table turned slowly, and I reached out with my chopsticks to pick up a piece of steamed fish. Just as the fish was about to land in my bowl, the turntable was suddenly pushed hard by someone. The plate spun away instantly, my chopsticks missed their mark, and the fish was smoothly delivered to the opposite side. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Choi spoke with a smile, but not a shred of apology could be heard in his tone. He was the assistant Asuka had poached with a high salary 3 months ago, possessing a beautifully fabricated resume as a Stanford finance master. After returning to the country, he hadn't spent a single day at the grassroots level, plunging straight into the company's core circle upon arrival. Many people in the company gossiped in private, saying that this was a right-hand man Asuka had specially found for herself. Choi held his wine glass, glanced at me, and then slowly swept his eyes across the entire table. Some people, occupy a position but do no work, only knowing how to sit here and enjoy a free ride. His voice wasn't loud, but it was just enough for everyone at the table to hear clearly. Several executives around lowered their heads. Some suppressed a laugh, some pretended to pick up food, and some looked down at their phones. No one took up the conversation, let alone spoke a word of justice for me. I put down my chopsticks and watched the turntable stop in front of me again. At that moment, I knew all too clearly in my heart that this was no slip of the hand. It was glaringly aimed at me. "Assistant Song," my tone was very flat. "This is the company gala, not a place for you to wag your tongue." He froze for a moment, then smiled even wider. "Mr. Lai, don't misunderstand. I was just making a joke." He deliberately emphasized the words, "Mr. Lai," as if reminding everyone present that this title had long since ceased to match reality. Just then, a commotion came from the entrance of the venue. Asuka had arrived. She wore a cleanly tailored, sharp black formal dress, her hair pinned up meticulously, her high heels stepping on the carpet without making an ounce of redundant sound. As soon as she appeared, the atmosphere at the main table changed instantly. Asuka was the founder of the company and also my wife. At least until tonight ended, she still was. She sat down at the head seat, her gaze sweeping across the table, and finally paused between me and Choi. "What's wrong?" Choi immediately chimed in, his tone gentle and proper. "It's nothing." "President Liu, just chatting a bit with Mr. Lee." Asuka looked toward me, her brow slightly furrowing. "Say less on an annual gala occasion." In that instant, I suddenly felt the person in front of me was incredibly foreign. It wasn't that she hadn't heard the targeting in Choi's words, she just had no intention of interfering from the very beginning. I looked at her and asked out loud, "Is this the financial genius you spent a high price to poach?" As soon as the words fell, her face instantly darkened. "Hiroshi, you've had enough!" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried her usual commanding aura. Sho is a returnee, and his professional background is right there. What about you? What did you rely on to get into the company back then? Do you not have any sense of it yourself? The table instantly fell into a dead silence, and several gazes brushed over to land squarely on me. I suddenly realized that in the eyes of these people, I had long ceased to be the partner who accompanied the company from nothing to something, staying up all night to fight together. I was left with only one label: rising through connections. Choi took advantage of the situation to catch the thread of the conversation, his tone full of feigned humility. "President Liu, don't say that. Mr. Ren is also experienced, it's just that some decision-making thoughts might be a bit conservative." As he spoke, he turned his head to look at me. "For example, that project with the Umatora Group, actively yielding 30% of the profits. If such an operation didn't have other considerations, it's really hard for people to understand." The words were spoken ambiguously, but they were enough to make people think of something sordid. I couldn't help but let out a laugh. That was for the subsequent channel and supply chain layout, not just calculating the short-term gains and losses in front of us. Choi narrowed his eyes. but there are rumors outside saying you took benefits in the middle." As soon as this sentence came out, the table went completely silent. I looked up at Asuka, waiting for her to speak. As long as she said a single word of impossible, this matter could be turned over. But she didn't. Instead, she slammed her wine glass heavily onto the table and said coldly, "Enough." "Nah!" She looked at me. Her tone as cold and hard as a block of ice. "Hiroshi, starting today, you will suspend your work to reflect and hand over all the work in your hands to show for connection." For a moment, I didn't react. What? The company is not yours alone. At this stage, no risks are allowed to exist. I must handle official business officially. Her speaking speed was very fast. "You have to understand me." The words "understand me" were like a blunt knife, sawing at my heart stroke by stroke. I looked at her, suddenly recognizing a fact. In her heart, I had long since changed from someone walking side by side to a trouble that needed to be cleaned up. Some people around discussed in low voices, and some picked up their wine glasses, pretending nothing had happened. Shoei stood to the side, managing his facial expression extremely well. Yet the pride in the depths of his eyes couldn't be hidden. I slowly stood up, and everyone's eyes moved along with me. I didn't talk about work, nor did I offer any explanation. I just pulled that ring out from my suit pocket. On the day of our 3rd anniversary, she had personally put it on me. At that time, she said that for the company to reach where it was today, the person who deserved the most thanks was me. I held the ring up under the light to take a look, then let go of my hand. Clink! The ring dropped into the champagne tower in front of me, the glass cups colliding to make a light sound, and the liquor rippled outwards layer by layer. "Let's get a divorce." When this sentence came out, the entire banquet hall seemed to have been pressed with a pause button. The champagne tower was still bubbling with tiny bubbles, and the lights illuminated the walls of the cups thoroughly, but no one looked at it again. All sights focused between me and Asuka. She suddenly stood up, her face ugly to the extreme. "Hiroshi, don't go crazy in this kind of setting. I am very sober." I picked up my phone from the table, my tone calm. "I accept your decision just now. For the remaining matters, we will go through the process privately." She seemed not to expect that I would be so direct, freezing for 2 seconds. Shoei stood out at this time, his tone thoughtful to just the right degree. "President Liu, the gala is still going on. How about first?" Asuka raised her hand to interrupt him, but her gaze never left me. "You go back first tonight." I didn't know whether this sentence was said to me or to herself. I didn't stay any longer, turned around, and walked away. Behind me, someone called my name, and some people discussed in low voices. I didn't turn back even once. The moment the elevator doors closed, the surrounding clamor was finally completely cut off, and the world quieted down. I didn't go home. I had the driver stop the car by the roadside and hailed a taxi myself to the address of a hotel in the city center. The room wasn't large, but it was very clean. I hung up my coat and sat by the bed, only to find that my palm had long been soaked with sweat. The phone vibrated once. It was a message from Asuka, and the content was very short. "Don't make a big deal out of this. We'll talk about the company's matters later." I didn't reply. More than 10 minutes later, her phone call came in. I picked it up. "What on earth do you mean? Can words like divorce be said so casually?" Her voice was pressed very low, obviously still at the gala venue. "It's not said casually. I've thought it through." The other end of the phone was silent for a few seconds. "Your current mood is wrong. Calm down first, and don't affect the company." "Affect the company?" Her first reaction was always this: "I have already been suspended." "So it won't affect me," I reminded her. Her tone instantly turned cold. "Hiroshi, don't forget that everything you have now was given to you by the company." I let out a laugh. "Then that's just right. Let's separate it clearly." The phone was hung up heavily by her. I put my phone on the bedside and didn't look at it again. By the time I came out after a shower, it was almost midnight. Early the next morning, I went straight to the law firm. Lawyer Abe, who was responsible for my personal affairs, had followed me for many years. After reading the materials I brought, his brow furrowed bit by bit. "Do you want to completely withdraw from this matter?" "Yes, all personal share authorizations will follow the agreement." He took a look at me. President Liu's side will probably have objections. That's her business. After signing the documents one by one, my whole person felt relaxed, instead, as if I had finally shed a heavy burden that had been pressing on me for a long time. Just as I walked out of the law firm at noon, Aska's phone call came again. This time, her tone had obviously changed. What do you mean? Share transfer? When did you prepare these things? A very long time ago. It's just that I never used it, I said. Her breathing became rapid. So you already planned it out, didn't you? I didn't answer directly. You will receive notice of the process. If there are objections, you can take legal channels. Hiroshi! For the first time, she lost control on the phone. Do you think this is a joke? No, that's why I'm so serious. There was no sound on the other end of the phone. A few seconds later, she said in a low voice, "You will regret it." I didn't listen any further and hung up the phone directly. In the afternoon, I went back to the company once, not to the office, but just to collect my personal belongings. The people in the administration department had obviously received a notice, and their eyes dodged when looking at me. My workstation had already been emptied by half. Several important documents were missing, and the computer had also been sealed. Shoei happened to come out of the meeting room and paused his steps upon seeing me. "Mr. Lai, back to handle the handover?" "To take personal belongings," I said. He nodded and had someone open the permissions for me, behaving politely throughout the entire process. Before leaving, he suddenly lowered his voice. "Some things. If you stand in the wrong position, it's very hard to turn back." I took a look at him. "Then you stand well." He smiled and didn't take up the conversation further. In the evening, I received an invitation to attend an internal meeting as an observer, ostensibly to cooperate with the handover work. I sat in the corner of the meeting room without the right to speak. Shoei sat in the main seat and began to talk about the upcoming project arrangements. The content was all too familiar to me, almost a carbon copy of my previous plan, except that the most critical risk buffering link had been deleted by him. I looked at the data on the projection, knowing all too clearly in my heart that with this kind of aggressive advancement speed, once a problem occurred, there wouldn't even be half a room for maneuver. Asuka sat beside him, nodding in approval throughout, without even looking toward my side once. The meeting ended, and someone wanted to come over to exchange pleasantries with me, but was blocked back by a single glance from her. I packed up my things and left without reminding anyone. This was the first time that I clearly saw the pit ahead, but chose to keep my mouth shut. It wasn't out of spite, it was just that I was no longer in that position. Returning to the hotel at night, Asuka sent a message. "As for the divorce, we'll talk about it after I finish this busy period." I took a look and didn't reply. Starting from the next day, my name rapidly disappeared clean from the company groups, work emails, and meeting lists. The divorce process advanced very quickly. When lawyer Abe sent the schedule to me, his wording was still restrained, only reminding me of a few nodes where both parties needed to be present for confirmation. After reading it, I didn't have any objections. On the day of my first visit to the civil affairs window, Asuka was 10 minutes late. She came directly from the company, her makeup complete and her clothes meticulous, as if she had just pulled herself out of an important meeting. I was already sitting in the waiting area, flipping through materials in my hand. She sat down opposite me, put her bag away, and offered not a single word of pleasantry. "Finishing it earlier is good for everyone." I nodded. "Yes!" The staff asked questions according to the process, and we answered one by one. When it involved property division, her tone was flat, like talking about a most ordinary business split. When it was time to sign, she picked up the pen and dropped her name with almost no pause, even adding a sentence. "In the future, we each go our own way." She said this sentence incomparably naturally. I took the pen and wrote the final stroke in the name column. The paper was pushed back to the window, the sound of the stamp falling, and all processes were completed. Walking out of the hall, the sunlight outside was so dazzling that one couldn't open their eyes. Asuka stopped her steps, took a look at me, and her tone was flat, yet filled with certainty. "Your leaving the company is of no benefit to you. Without the platform, you are nothing." I didn't refute. This kind of talk, she could say it out loud now, and I could listen to it. She picked up a phone call, turned around, and walked away, her high heels stepping on the steps with a fast rhythm that didn't pause for half a second. I stood for a while before turning to leave. The company's changes were even faster than I had anticipated. In less than a week, several project managers I had previously led were transferred one after another. Some went to marginal departments, and some were directly asked to take indefinite leave. I would occasionally receive their phone calls. No one said anything explicitly, just asking, "How have you been recently?" I only simply replied, "Not bad." I wouldn't say a single word more. Choi began to appear frequently in various meetings of the company, and his name appeared with higher and higher frequency in internal emails. Once when I was eating outside, I happened to run into a supplier I had cooperated with before. The other party exchanged a few pleasantries and asked me in a lowered voice, "Are you no longer managing the matters over there?" I nodded. "I won't participate in the future." He was silent for a moment and didn't ask further. I began to actively invite some old clients to meet, neither at the company nor talking about specific cooperation. Some were invited to tea rooms and some to quiet restaurants, chatting about things of the past, how the projects of those years were advanced step by step, which decision almost caused a big problem, and how we carried through together. They listened quietly without interrupting. Someone asked, "What are your plans for the future?" I only said I was still looking. These people didn't give me any commitment, nor did they choose a side, but I could feel that they were reevaluating me. This person not as Asuka's husband, not as an executive of the company, but simply as Hiroshi. These situations quickly reached back to the company. That night, Asuka called me, her tone full of impatience. "You've been seeing quite a few people lately. Just personal socializing. You've already left the platform, yet you're still active everywhere. Don't you find it redundant?" She let out a cold laugh. "People give you face only for the sake of the company." I didn't respond. She continued, "You being like this now will only make yourself look very awkward." The other end of the phone was very quiet. I knew she was waiting for me to refute, waiting for me to explain, but I said nothing. Before she hung up the phone, she left that line again. "Without the company, you are nothing." She said it with incomparable certainty. The next day, I received an internally leaked meeting minutes. Choi had pushed all the previously troubled projects onto my head during the meeting. His wording wasn't intense, yet every sentence pointed toward historical legacy issues, stating that the decision-making background at that time was non-transparent. The risk assessment was visibly insufficient, and even proposed to completely clear out old thinking. This was paving the way for the next moves. After reading it, I deleted the file directly. In the evening, I received a phone call from the vice president who used to follow me on projects. His voice was pressed very low. "I might be transferred away, where to hasn't been decided yet." He paused. "If you have arrangements in the future, remember to let me know." I didn't give him any commitment, only saying a sentence, "Take care of yourself." Hanging up the phone, I stood by the window, looking at the endless flow of traffic downstairs. I knew very well that at this stage, whatever I said or did would be interpreted as being unreconciled, and Asuka thought exactly the same way. In her eyes, everything I was doing now was nothing more than a struggle after leaving the core. Without a platform and without resources, I would sooner or later be beaten back to my original form by reality. She thought I was useless. This judgment was currently affecting every single one of her subsequent choices, while I just gathered all the information bit by bit without making a sound. The project spearheaded by Choi quickly became the top priority within the company, and related progress could be heard almost every day. The advancement speed was shockingly fast, nodes were moved forward repeatedly, and the numbers on the financial statements looked better layer by layer. I heard the complete situation from someone else's mouth at an industry wine party. The other party didn't know that I had already left the company and just treated it as casual chatter. Your company's move this time is quite fierce, and the conditions given are also very generous. Even the cooperating party was a bit surprised. I held my wine glass and didn't take up the conversation. On the way back, I dug out that publicly disclosed cooperation announcement. The terms were written extravagantly, yet it uniquely lacked the most critical risk buffering space, which was compressed almost to the limit. This was Choi's style, pursuing extreme efficiency, pleasing the book data, and proving himself with short-term results. This kind of approach showed no problems when things went smoothly. But once the market experienced fluctuations, there wouldn't be even half a room for adjustment. I turned off my phone and didn't look any further. A few days later, Aska called me. This time, her tone had obviously softened a lot. "Are you free recently?" I was just about to head out, and hearing this sentence, my steps paused for a moment. "What's the matter?" That project was touched upon before, and there are some details I want you to help take a look at. I was silent for 2 seconds. "I am no longer participating in the company's affairs." From the other end of the phone came the sound of her suppressed breathing. "Just taking a look? There's no need for you to step forward." "No need?" I answered very dryly. She seemed not to expect that I would refuse so thoroughly, and her tone instantly cooled down. "Hiroshi, don't be so calculating." The word calculating made me suddenly feel a bit amused. "Asuka, you looking for me now is not because of trust, but because you are worried." She didn't refute immediately. "I just feel that you used to do things more cautiously," she added, yet still carrying a commanding tone. "At this stage, there cannot be any problems." I stood by the roadside, watching the red light turn on. "Then all the more you shouldn't look for me." "Do you have to put it this way?" "You were the one who drew the boundaries clearly first," I said. "Now I am just staying outside the boundaries." The other end of the phone was silent for a few seconds. "You've changed." "It's me," I answered. "So we've long been unsuitable." I hung up the phone, not giving her another chance to speak. That night, I didn't go back to the hotel, but went to a small bistro I often frequented. The owner knew me, didn't ask much, and just poured me a glass of wine. The financial news happened to be broadcasting on the television. In the scrolling bar at the bottom of the screen, the name of that project appeared. The host's tone was neutral, merely stating facts: cooperation scale, advancement progress, market response. Everything looked smooth and successful. But I noticed a detail. In the cooperator's expression, a few more vague words were added. "Adjust according to subsequent situations, specific arrangements to be confirmed separately." This was leaving a way out for themselves. I finished that glass of wine, got up, and left. Early the next morning, Asuka's phone call came again. This time, her speaking speed was visibly much faster. "The payment return from the cooperator's side has been delayed." I didn't show a single shred of surprise. "The reason?" "They say it's an internal process issue." She paused. "Have you encountered this kind of situation before?" I didn't answer directly. "How was the contract written?" "It was signed according to the version given by Shoei." After she finished, she added another line. "It has already been signed completely." I didn't say anything more. She waited for a while, and seeing that I didn't make a sound, a bit of urgency was added to her tone. "Can't you just give a suggestion?" "I am not a person of the company anymore," I reminded her. The other end of the phone quieted down. After a few seconds, she said in a low voice, "You wouldn't have been like this before." I didn't take up this line. "Asuka," I said, "what you need now is not a suggestion but a person to bear the consequences." She didn't speak anymore and hung up the phone directly. That night, the cooperator officially sent a rare letter, the wording polite yet clearly stating that a portion of the funds needed to be paid later. The news spread quickly within the company. I received several phone calls, all from former colleagues, their tones varying yet with only one core. "Will this project encounter a big problem?" I didn't give any judgment, only saying it was not within my scope of responsibility. Shoei explained very calmly at the internal meeting, saying this was just a normal process adjustment that didn't affect the overall rhythm, pushing the responsibility onto the external environment. The solution was written beautifully. Asuka didn't refute at the meeting, still choosing to believe him. And I knew very well this was just a start. For a project with the risk buffer removed, once the first payment encountered a problem, all subsequent links would be implicated. Not an instant crash, but a slow loss of control. Late that night, Asuka sent me another message with only one sentence. "Did you already know it would be like this?" I looked at the screen and didn't reply. Once some problems reach this step, whatever is said is too late. The funding problem wasn't delayed for too long. The cooperator's delayed payment return quickly triggered a chain reaction. The original supply plan was forced to slow down, and several key expenses were stuck halfway. The finance department began to hold consecutive meetings. It was on the third night that I received Aska's message. Not a phone call, but a long string of text. The content wasn't intense, yet it was full of suppressed emotions. She mentioned the company's current pressure, mentioned the changes in the external environment, mentioned the difficulty of her bearing it alone. The last sentence was a memory about the past. That year, you stayed up until midnight during the memory, and the next day you still accompanied me to see clients. I finished reading and didn't reply. Early the next morning, she sent another line, "Can we meet up?" I didn't agree immediately until noon, when she called directly. This time, her tone was no longer unyielding, even carrying entreaty. "Hiroshi, just treat it as a chat, okay?" I gave the address of a restaurant, not near the company nor a place we used to go often. She arrived very early. When I arrived, she was already sitting by the window, the coffee on the table half cold. Looking up to see me, there was a moment of loosening in her eyes. "You've gotten thinner," she said. I sat down and didn't take up the line. She was silent for a while and opened her mouth first. "You should already know the company's current situation." "I've heard some. It's more troublesome than you think," she said in a low voice. "Shoei can't suppress the scene anymore." This was the first time she directly negated this name in front of me, carrying undisguised disappointment. I didn't take up the line, waiting for her to continue. "The board of directors side has objections against me." She pinched the coffee cup, her knuckles turning white. "They feel that letting you go back then was a lapse in my judgment." I raised my eyes to look at her, and she avoided my gaze. "If you are willing to come back," she spoke very slowly, "the position and conditions can all be discussed again." When this sentence was spoken, she visibly let out a sigh of relief, as if finally laying her prepared hole card onto the table. I didn't refuse immediately, only asking a question. "You looking for me now is because of need or because of regret?" Her expression stiffened for a moment, then she said, "Both." I nodded. "Then it won't do." She was stunned. "Why?" "Need will pass, and regret will too," I said, her voice instantly raised by a few notches. "Just this ruthless?" I looked at her. "You didn't have a single bit of hesitation when making the decision back then either." She opened her mouth, and ultimately, nothing could be said. The atmosphere stiffened for a few seconds, and she suddenly changed direction. "Then let's at least make things clear." "It's already very clear," I said. Her emotions finally couldn't be suppressed anymore. "Did you already want to leave long ago? Did you already not want to be with me long ago?" Some people in the restaurant glanced over. I lowered my voice. "You asking these now doesn't have any meaning." She stared at me, the rims of her eyes turning red. "So you calculated everything well, just waiting for this day, right?" I didn't explain. Once this kind of question begins to be explained, it will fall into an endless tug-of-war, and I already didn't want to tug anymore. She suddenly stood up, the chair scraping against the floor to make a sharp, light sound. "You will regret it," this sentence she had already said for the second time. I didn't respond, and she turned around and walked away, her steps fast without pausing for half a second. That same night, the internal contradictions of the company became completely public. Shoei proposed a new adjustment plan at the meeting, attempting to attribute all the previous problems to Asuka's decision-making rhythm. The wording was still polite, yet every sentence was cutting away responsibility. Asuka refuted on the spot, and the two people broke into a frontal conflict at the meeting for the first time. The meeting ended hastily ahead of schedule. I received internal news the next day, saying Shoei privately sought out several core executives to discuss subsequent arrangements, his tone already lacking the duty of an assistant, looking more like standing in position in advance. Asuka's side clearly felt the pressure and began to frequently contact me, sometimes phone calls, sometimes messages. The content no longer talked about conditions, only about the past. She mentioned the difficulties of the early entrepreneurial stage, mentioned those troubles I blocked for her, saying she didn't mean that back then. I didn't reply line by line, only replying with one line when she repeatedly questioned, "The past matters have already passed." This sentence was like a knife. She finally realized that this time I really wouldn't turn back, and on the company's side, the situation was completely losing control. Choi began to crazily shift the blame, using different ways of speaking in different settings to disassemble the responsibility and share it out. The only thing repeatedly mentioned was still historical legacy issues. Late that night, Asuka stood downstairs at the hotel where I stayed. She called me and I didn't pick up. She sent messages and I didn't reply either. I stood in front of the window, watching her car lights stay on for a long time before slowly extinguishing. Once some roads reach this step, one can only brace oneself to go forward, never able to turn back again. The cooperator's accountability came faster than anticipated, not a public falling out, but a rigorously worded lawyer's letter. The contract terms were cited line by line, the project nodes were marked one by one, and finally landed on one sentence, requesting a recalculation of the responsibility boundaries. This meant that all the problems previously suppressed were officially laid onto the table. The inside of the company was completely in chaos. The directors who were originally still watching began to frequently intervene. Legal and finance took turns entering the meeting room, and everyone was looking for a clear attribution of responsibility. And Choi's movements were shockingly fast. As soon as the first internal review meeting ended, he began to meet with various directors individually. In name, it was a situation explanation. The actual content, however, was very clear. The project direction had its final decision made by Asuka, and the critical terms were signed after her confirmation. He was merely an executor. Not a single word of these talk was false, yet he plucked himself completely clean. I received that vice president's phone call on a certain night. His voice was very low. Choi has already handed the materials up. Handed to whom? The board of directors, and also several cooperators. He paused, giving a bitter laugh. He looked for me, asking me to help testify for him. I didn't take up the line. I didn't agree, but I didn't dare to refuse too flatly either, he said. I understood his situation. At this time, choosing a side itself was a risk. After hanging up the phone, I sat for a long time. Matters were advancing according to the most realistic trajectory. No dramatic reversals, only naked interests and self-preservation. At noon the next day, Asuka called me again, her voice sounding exhausted. Let's meet up. I didn't refuse. The location was a very quiet tea house she chose. When she arrived, she clearly hadn't rested well, her eye makeup was much lighter, and her whole person had thinned down by a circle. She didn't speak for a very long time after sitting down. I poured her a cup of tea and pushed it in front of her. She looked up at me, her eyes full of panic. Choi pushed all responsibilities onto me. She said this sentence very slowly, as if finally accepting this fact. You only know now? My tone was very flat. She didn't refute, only lowering her head. The board of directors has already begun to investigate. It would be abnormal if it didn't find its way to your head. Her hand pinching the cup suddenly tightened. I believed his nonsense back then. I looked at her, not taking up the line. Did you already see it out long ago? She suddenly asked. I didn't deny it. Yes, her breathing suddenly hitched. Then why didn't you say so? I've said it, I've reminded you. You didn't listen. She opened her mouth, wanting to refute. Yet ultimately, nothing was said. At that moment, the emotions on her face were very complex. Not just regret, but also a kind of blankness from being thoroughly struck by reality. What to do now? She asked in a low voice. I looked at her. You are the responsible person of the company. This question shouldn't be asked of me. She raised her head, the rims of her eyes turning red. If you were still there back then, these matters wouldn't have become like this at all. Maybe, I said, but you already made the choice. She was silent. The tea house was very quiet, with only the boiling fragrance of the tea water. After a while, she suddenly opened her mouth. Choi also contacted competitors. I raised my eyes to look at her. When? Last night? She gave a bitter smile. He thought I didn't know. This step was already not self-preservation, but thoroughly jumping ship. How do you plan to handle it? The board of directors will handle it, she paused. But the result won't be good. I nodded. This was the first time she admitted in front of me that she had completely lost control. "Hiroshi!" She suddenly called my name. I looked toward her. If I hadn't done that at the annual gala back then, her voice was hoarse, would things be different? I didn't answer, not because I didn't know the answer, but because this question had long ceased to have any meaning. She waited for a while. And seeing that I didn't speak, she gently nodded her head. "I understand." When she got up, her movements were somewhat slow, looking as if she had aged several years all at once. Walking to the doorway, she stopped her steps, not turning back. "You don't need to have any scruples anymore." I didn't respond. After she left, I sat in my original seat and finished that cup of tea. A few days later, matters began to erupt in a concentrated manner. The board of directors officially initiated the investigation process. The cooperator sent a second letter with visibly much harsher wording, and Shoi's side began to frequently be absent from meetings. The reasons were varied, yet no one questioned further. Someone told me privately that he was already contacting external job opportunities, but the situation wasn't smooth. At this kind of time, no one was willing to take over a person carrying risks. The number of times Asuka was called into the board of directors became more and more frequent. She began to become silent, no longer publishing any judgments to the outside. I would occasionally see her car downstairs, yet I never went up to say hello again. It wasn't an intentional avoidance, but just really not necessary anymore. The truth was already laid right there, not needing me to expose it. Some people, in the end, will be pushed to the corner step by the road they chose themselves. When the matter entered the liquidation stage, it became quiet instead. That kind of chaos where there were new changes every day and new messages every hour disappeared, replaced by a set of cold, irreversible processes. The banks moved their hands first, and the credit lines that could still be rotated were tightened one by one, not withdrawn all at once but frozen in batches, every step compliant and legal. The finance department held meetings for 3 consecutive days, and the numbers on the books were spread out and disassembled item by item. When I received the news, I was currently in another locality, discussing a new project. The other party's tone was very cautious, speaking very slowly. "Your former company's side, the situation is not too good." "I know." "Subsequently, if it implicates me, it doesn't matter anymore." I interrupted him. The other party was silent for a moment and didn't continue this topic. Shoi was thoroughly isolated during this stage. His movement of jumping ship was too urgent and too obvious. Several companies he privately contacted quickly spread the news back into the circle. No one was willing to take over a person who had already exposed risks. The investigation results didn't come slowly. The modification records of critical terms, communication emails, meeting minutes were laid on the table one by one. Shoi attempted to cut away responsibility, only to find that many places could long since not be cut clean. He began to frequently request leave, later simply no longer appearing at the company, and even later was the official notice to cooperate with the investigation. It was at a dinner gathering that I heard the news of him being requested by relevant departments to cooperate with the investigation. No one gloated, just simply mentioning a line, their tones already defaulting to his ending. And the company's situation took a sharp downturn. Several core clients withdrew one after another, the reasons written politely yet leaving not a single bit of room. Suppliers began to request cash payment on the spot, and the originally defaulted account periods were cut off with one stroke. The cash flow quickly couldn't hold up anymore. The differences within the board of directors were thoroughly laid onto the clear surface. Some advocated self-rescue, some advocated timely loss stoppage, and the final decision was to enter liquidation procedures. On the day the notice was sent out, the weather was very bad. I was in the office, watching the sky color outside the window darken bit by bit. The phone vibrated once. It was a very short message. "The company is going to close." The person sending the message was Asuka. I looked at that line of words and didn't reply for a long time, not because I didn't know what to say, but simply because there were no words. That could change an already doomed result. It started to rain that evening. The rain wasn't heavy, but fell very densely. I stood in front of the window, watching the street lamps, pulled by the rainwater into blurry strips of light. The phone rang again. It was still Aska. This time it was a phone call. I picked it up. Her side was very quiet, and the sound of rain could be clearly heard. "I am downstairs from you." I didn't speak immediately. "I'll just stand for a bit, not disturbing you," she added a line. I walked to the window and looked down. Her car was parked by the roadside, lights not on, and the person just stood beside the car, rainwater flowing down along her hair, not even holding an umbrella. I stood for a long time and didn't go down, not out of spite, but just clear that some occasions were long since unsuitable for meeting again. About 20 minutes later, she sent a message, "I'm leaving." I didn't reply. The next morning, the news came out. The company officially entered bankruptcy procedures. The announcement was written very restrainedly, merely stating basic facts. I turned off my phone and continued the work at hand. Shoi's name quickly disappeared thoroughly from the industry. Initially, there were still people mentioning that he had been investigated, but later this name was slowly mentioned by no one anymore. Like a stone thrown into water that raised a round of ripples and ultimately sank to the bottom of the water, lacking signs of life. Aska's side processed very slowly. She was requested to sell shares under her name to be used for debt clearing, and her personal assets were also frozen in part. She didn't contact me again until a week later, when I accidentally ran into her in a parking lot. She stood in front of her own car, looking down and flipping through her bag, her movements somewhat hurried. The car was still that car, yet the person had haggled too much. We glanced at each other. She nodded, and I also nodded in response, not saying a single word. At that moment, I was very clear that between us, there was already nothing that could continue. Returning into the car, I started the engine, the wipers swinging stroke by stroke, sweeping the watermarks on the windshield completely clean. The road ahead was very clear and also very long. The matter of the company's bankruptcy quickly faded down in the circle, not because it wasn't important, but just that this kind of matter wasn't rare in the industry. Some people discussed a few lines, and it was quickly covered by new messages. I didn't pay attention to the subsequent details, liquidation handover, and auditing. These processes were all unrelated to me. What should be cut off had long since been cut off. 1 year's time is not long to say, nor short to say. My new company doesn't walk fast, but the direction is very steady. The team is not large, yet the structure is very solid, with every step walked seeing results. Some clients were known from before. They never mentioned past matters, only talking about present cooperation. This kind of feeling is very grounding. Occasionally, someone would also ask about Aska, their tones lacking inquiring, looking more like a casual mention. Where did she go later? I didn't know much either, only hearing that she sold her original house, left this city, went to the south, and held a post in a company of a not large scale, the position neither high nor low, just enough to maintain a living. Shoi's news was even less, almost thoroughly losing information. One night, I came out after working overtime and passed by a convenience store. While standing in front of the cold closet choosing water, I heard someone behind calling my name, the voice not loud yet very clear. I turned back and saw Aska. She wore a very ordinary coat. Her hair was cut short. She wore no makeup, looking a bit tired, yet very peaceful. We glanced at each other for a few seconds. "Long time no see." She opened her mouth first. I nodded. The lights in the convenience store were very bright, yet appeared a bit empty. The clerk at the cashier desk looked down, flipping through a phone, and no one noticed us. She looked at the water in my hand. "You're still developing on this side?" "Temporarily, yes." She nodded. "Very good." She said this sentence very sincerely. We stood for a bit, and both didn't speak further. The atmosphere wasn't awkward, yet it also couldn't be talked of as close. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she suddenly said, "passing by this side, dropping by to take a look. Safe travels on the road?" She gave a light smile. "You're still like this." I didn't take up the line. She hesitated for a bit and asked again, "Are you living well now?" "Not bad," she nodded, looking as if letting out a sigh of relief. "That's good." We walked together to the doorway. The night wind was a bit cool, the street was very quiet, and there weren't many cars. She stood below the steps and took a look at me. That day at the annual gala, actually I thought about it many times afterward. I didn't interrupt her. Not because you proposed divorce, she said. It was because I discovered at that moment I really didn't treat you as family. She said this sentence very lightly, yet word by word clearly. I looked at the shadow under the street lamp, offering no response. Some words, spoken out now, are already too late. She gave a self-deprecating smile. I nodded. Be careful on the road. She didn't say anything more, turned around and left, her back quickly swallowed by the light and shadow of the street lamps. I stood for a bit before returning into the car. On the way home, the car radio happened to be broadcasting an interview program. The host asked the guest if they had ever made a decision they regretted. The guest paused for a bit and said that many decisions felt reasonable at the moment. Looking back, however, they were very cruel. I turned off the radio. In my mind, the frame of that day at the annual gala suddenly flashed. The turntable pushed hard away, the fish falling into someone else's bowl, and in front of the champagne tower, the sound of the ring dropping into the liquor crisp yet brief. Actually, at that moment, everything had already ended. All matters that happened later were nothing more than spreading out the already doomed result bit by bit in front of everyone. Someone asked me if I would regret the divorce, thinking that if there wasn't that night's tearing of faces, we perhaps would still drag on for a long time, dragging until each other became thoroughly unrecognizable, hating each other. Being like this now is already the most decent and clearest ending. The car parked into the parking space, and I got off the car holding the keys. The night color was very deep, yet not pressing people down. I was very clear in my heart that some relationships, once stamped into powder in front of everyone, can never be picked back again, while for some roads, only by bidding farewell to the wrong person can one walk more steadily and further.